Great. Well, thank you, Chris. And it's really lovely to see everybody and see everyone coming in, especially given we're kicking off the year. And so excited to be here and talk about all things AI. So I'll go ahead and share my screen because I have a presentation. And as Chris mentioned today, the goal of this presentation is designed to be interactive. So feel free to raise your hand, put questions in the chat. But we're going to really talk about how do we unleash the power of AI for finance and what's going on, not just over the past few years with AI, but also what's really been happening even as recently as the past like week or so. As for example, we just had CES this week and we had NVIDIA present. And so there's just a lot of different things going on in the world of AI and in particular generative AI. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about transforming the CFO's role. So how these technologies are shaping our functions as well as the finance office, everything from small companies all the way into large enterprise companies. We're going to talk about how technology we can work through enhancing risk management and how we manage and navigate these technologies. And then we're also going to talk about current 2025 trends. So really looking forward to being here with you guys and also having a great discussion. Well, and like all technology, we keep going as we figure it out. So anyway, what that was doing was that had actually recorded my voice and then it had played a AI clip that I had typed in. So like we always do with technology, we pivot. So one of the things I like to do at the beginning of a presentation is really understand where the audience is from an AI perspective. So we'll go ahead and do a poll and really understand, is the audience an AI novice? Are you guys AI curious or are you an AI expert? And by novice, what that really means is you've tried a little bit of AI, but you're really kind of just learning. AI curious is really, okay, you're at that point of you've started to implement some AI into your work processes, into your strategy. And then AI expert is really at this point, AI is very integrated into your finance functions. So we'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and answer the poll.
There we go.
Okay, so where we're at right now is AI novice for the most part. And so that's great because that can really see, we'll get a lot out of the training today because really where we're at is thinking through what that looks like. And so then really what we're going to be talking about for most of the conversation today is around what we call GenAI versus the other kinds of artificial intelligence. And so what GenAI is versus the rest of artificial intelligence is AI has been around for at least 30, 40 years. It's been around since the 70s. And so what we're talking about here has been around since about 2022 and is kind of iterating almost weekly at this point. And it's a technology that is revolutionizing the way we approach problem solving and decision making. And a lot of this is when you hear the phrases large language models or LLMs, these are those tools that are like ChatGPT. Google has a version called Gemini. Claude has a version called Anthropic is called Claude. These are tools that really what they work on is they work on an AI called natural language processing, and they can think through and analyze different processes that we'll get into from a financial applications that can be used from everything for finance analysis to even thinking through using, like we just saw, a AI avatar, basically. And so when we think about how do we use this in terms of the finance function, there's different ways we can use them. We can use them for strategic planning. We can use it for risk management. We can use it for more like creative insights, or we can also using it for managing AI thought processes and things like that as well. One of the learnings that has come up though over the past, I'd say year or so, when we think about the world of finance versus other AI implications is how and when do you use AI? So do you use AI fully or do you actually use it with like human intervention? And what I mean by that is, do you give an LLM or an AI tool basically and say, okay, run with this entire process, or do you check in? And there's been a lot of studies out there lately where they found that basically with finance, humans should always be involved. So when it comes to more transactional work, so like AP processing and things like that, that's a very good use for AI. But really, as from a finance perspective, we should always be checking it. So when we think about opportunities for AI and technology, there's a couple different uses. So there's fraud detection, there's accounts payable, there's forecasting and budgeting is another use. So actually what we'll see is there's different applications around financial analysis, things like that. And then there's even risk management. So like AI-driven risk assessment tools where it can analyze a wide range of data to help us figure out how do we manage financial risk. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions. And then when we're thinking about how do we integrate AI into finance workflows, the way we think about that is we really want to understand as we're implementing them, we want to identify those key tasks that can be automated. So a good example of automation is if we go back to like more of those transactional level processing items. So if we think about accounts payable as an example, there are things that can be repetitive. Those are good opportunities where we can use artificial intelligence because that's something that can really be automated from a machine perspective, and then that can be used from an AI item. And then when we roll that out from AI, we want to roll it out from a pilot perspective. We want to train our teams, and then we really want to figure out how do we integrate these and continuously optimize and expand it. And so the other thing to think about too, as we roll these tools out, is we want to think about our integration considerations. So some of the things that have been coming up as far as trends is around data privacy. So how are we managing the data considerations? So are you going to use, like, for example, if you're using a LLM such as ChatGPT, you can turn on certain data privacy requirements, such as you can ask ChatGPT not to remember you. Or if you want to use something that's more built in-house, you want to build privacy considerations around how and when you manage that data. So there's certain things to think about from that perspective as well. And then so when it comes to building and using your AI tools within a business enterprise situation, the way to think about it from a best practice perspective is thinking about implementing robust security tools, partnering with your IT team on making sure that the tools you're implementing make sense from a business perspective, and really empowering the business across the organization to implement those tools that make sense. And so then what we'll go into now is some of these more cutting edge trends around 2025 and specific use cases for AI as well. And so what we're seeing now with finance is we're seeing things that there are certain tools. So the ones that have come up in addition to avatars, for example, are digital twins. And so digital twins in finance, they're virtual representations. And so these are examples of physical assets, processes, or systems that basically mirror a person or mirror a process that you can use to analyze finance. You can use it to analyze financial instruments, or as you'll see in a second, you can even have a virtual CFO or a CEO that can represent you in certain situations, such as like an earnings call, for example. Then what's also coming up with AI is we now have AI personas. So we actually even have AI-powered virtual financial advisors. So those have shown up where they're running financial analyses and looking through financial portfolios and thinking through things like that as well. And then some of the other examples that we've seen have been predictive analytics. So using finance and AI for analyzing past results, or even looking through massive amounts of data to think through things and then predict them as well. And then, yeah, so one of the questions around, are there any regulatory agencies? So with regulatory agencies that are monitoring AI usage, there is, so there's the agency called NIST, and NIST has created a framework for monitoring best practices in AI, and in particular GenAI. And then more recently, so it's not US specific, it actually is in the international space. Europe has recently come out with guidelines on AI and like best practices around AI. So the approach has typically been with managing AI, it's been basically almost once the technology is created, then the regulations are built in place because this technology is moving so fast. They're thinking about regulating it after the technology comes out instead of trying to preemptively regulate it. So it's a little bit of almost I'd say like they're trying to figure out how to self-regulate it from that perspective. So then one of the other cutting edge topics in finance, as well as just in general, is Gen AI, but this is a subset of Gen AI, which is agentic AI. And so agentic AI is now, we have our LLMs, but then we have what are called AI agents. So how many of you have heard of this comment about agents, or like Salesforce has what they're calling like agent force? Does that ring a bell to anybody? Yeah, I see some nodding heads. Yeah, so what these are is these are more independent AI. So basically what you can do is you can give this artificial intelligence an action. And that action can be like, for example, go analyze a finance portfolio and tell me what that performance is. And that agent will go do that action independently, and then will come back and then tell you that result. And so this is really what you have everyone from like the head of Microsoft to the head of Salesforce to others saying like this is the next wave of technology. They're all developing their own agents or even systems of agents to figure out how do we actually use these to do different productivity. And so what we're seeing, and we'll show a few examples of this in a second, is we're seeing ways to leverage AI in new methods that allow us to help really take these tasks that traditionally would take people hours or sometimes weeks or months to really think through how do we analyze these tasks and how do we do this in a way that's independent and help from a productivity perspective. So one of the examples that's actually very useful for, I'd say like the small to like middle market finance individuals is, interestingly enough, Intuit is now using agents. And so the way they're using agents is, well, they're saying that, for example, they'll build an AI CFO or an AI chief marketing officer. But the way they're implementing that is they're implementing it in analysis around finance. So like, for example, if you go into QuickBooks, right now it had AI around coding. Well, their next wave of that is the coding and everything can be analyzed in the financials that are in QuickBooks to predict trends. So like basically it would take something like you and I analyzing it, and then it would say, okay, what is that predictive outcome? So very much like what a CFO would do or a chief marketing officer would do. So that's what they're looking at from that perspective. And then yes, we will get a copy of the presentation. And then one of the other ones, and then we'll see if the video works on this, that's come up too, is so back to the avatars or digital twins. So for financials, so this is towards the more enterprise state of the house, is Klarna. So Klarna decided about 2 years ago is that in addition to their business model being more tech focused, they also wanted to figure out how and where what they could do with AI as a whole. And so when they looked at AI, they said, okay, what are those different innovative technologies we can use? And so they actually stopped hiring people. And what happened was they also figured out how and when they can use AI across the business. And so what that resulted in, interestingly enough, this past quarter, was they released an AI CEO. So they were able to take an image of their CEO and present their financial earnings. And I don't know the video, so it won't show the sound, but he is basically presenting and he's giving his earnings report for Q3. And this is a completely digital generated image of the CEO presenting on the profits and growth in financial results of Klarna's income statement. So from that perspective, AI has really come a long ways in ultimately figuring out how and when what our business applications are from finance. And you can see with the presentation too, the other thing you can do with these now is in addition to the digital twins, they can present financial information that can be distributed as well across the internet, which gives the financial numbers too. And then back to the concept of risk management, one of the other use cases that has come up is this is a bit of a chat bot, but the other thing that they're thinking about is how do you take AI and use it for good? And so in the UK, actually what happened was one of the UK risk authorities decided to create a chatbot called Daisy, the AI grandma. And what she did was she went through and she actually figured out how to help out scam the scammers. And so I'll give you this link after the presentation, but what she did is she's a AI generated grandma that will sit on the phone for hours, basically outwitting scammers that would typically sit on the phone and try and take advantage of senior citizens. So basically helping prevent financial crimes by creating this AI chatbot from that perspective. So there's been a lot of new uses of AI, basically. And so the question is, given the rising role of bad actors, how liable are C-suite executives? You know, that's a good question. So that's actually one that's come up, but it's still being, I'd say, litigated. So there was an interesting example. It wasn't specifically to C-suite executives, but there was a question. It was a case, and I don't know the name of the case, but there was one with an automotive company where online there was an AI agent that was doing sales for the company, and they were able to actually sell a car to a person for $1. And so they were litigating whether that car could actually be sold for that dollar. And the way it ended up being sold, like they ended up saying, okay, no, they still have the customer still had to pay market price. But there's things like that that are coming up because of these new AI tools, is like ultimately who's responsible. So is the executive responsible, that digital twin, because like, for example, let's say he gives financial earnings that are incorrect, or is it really ultimately the company that's responsible from that perspective? So a lot of that is still being figured out. So then the other thing that we'll actually go into now as well is, given we have all these different tools in our tool belt, now how do we actually use these in practice, and what does this mean for us tactically? So as finance executives, as CFOs, as heads of our functions, like how do we use these? How does it apply to us? And so one of the things I'm going to show you guys is actually a case study in how to develop synthetic personas, and also how to use them to help out with financial and business insights. And so what synthetic personas are, so in addition to these digital twins, you can actually create basically what are called like fictitious persons. And these are people who are designed within the LLM to mirror certain individuals. So that it can include like a chief marketing officer. It could include like a persona that's like a 30-year-old if you're trying to test out, like, for example, do a study on seeing how people will react to a new food product. But you can use these personas for everything from market research to user data to demographic information. And it's really cool from that perspective to help out with that. And the way you create these personas is through a thing called prompt engineering. So have you guys heard that phrase before, called prompt engineering, and kind of wondered what that was? Well, what prompt engineering is it really is querying the models or these LLMs and just asking them a series of questions. And so what we'll show on this is, okay, perfect. Yeah, so somebody's working with that right now. And so one of the things that's coming up is with prompt engineering is really you're asking these LLMs, so like in this example is ChatGPT. You could do this with Gemini, you could do this with Copilot, which is now almost built into a lot of these computers. And you're asking them a question. It could be something as simple as like, please tell me what you do. Or it could be as complex as saying like, assume you are an analyst. And so what everyone is finding as they test out the different models is that as you test these models out, it actually makes more sense to help the model help you by treating the model as if it's a person or as if it's a member of your team. And so some of the best practices are really thinking about giving the model context and also giving it certain different techniques for what they're calling prompting. So really prompting these instructions. And so what's in here, and you'll have these takeaways, is there's two different kinds of techniques for prompting. So this first one, the structure is kind of like that thing that we all remember from grade school, which is like that who, what, why, and where. So really giving it context of, okay, who are you supposed to be when I'm giving you this instruction? What are you supposed to be doing? Why are you doing this? So what's the goal of the task? And then where? So like basically any backgrounds or limitations around the task. And then the other thing that recently came out with the LLMs as best practices, in particular with finance, because oftentimes what we're doing is really complex financial analysis. So like, for example, we may be analyzing financials over 3 years, or we may be doing ratio analysis, or we may get a result and we may want to dive deeper, is what they're calling chain of thought prompting. And so with the LLMs, what came up over this past year was if you ask processes in a certain series, then you'll actually get better results. And so some of these best practices are really coming up around how do you break complex requests down into smaller steps. And then as the model gives you different responses, you iterate on those responses. And so what we'll do too right now is we'll go into an example here where I'll show you how we actually can create what are called synthetic personas. And so we'll do a roundtable discussion that goes over something that I have found useful, and I think others may find useful as well. It's around how to understand financial results from a very common company. In this case, we'll use NVIDIA, but I will generate synthetic personas, which are, in this case, financial experts, having a roundtable discussion around NVIDIA's results and their business model and how they're actually going to perform in, or how they think they're going to perform in regards to the financial industry. And then what the LLMs can do, and this can be any of the LLMs, is they can synthesize basically your key points of agreement from the roundtable. And they can also say like, oh, here's the disagreement areas. And so what this can do with this analysis is it can help you for any company really think through, okay, what are those topics that you could be missing? And what are those things that you want to think through as well? Okay. So for this one, we're going to choose ChatGPT. And then just so you know, I've had ChatGPT and Claude have both been working really well and also sometimes acting up. And I think that's because they're rolling out new models. So I can show you guys both how Claude works and how ChatGPT works from that perspective as well too. And so with the prompt, one of the things to think about is how do you actually train the model to give it good directions? And so with financial analysis, oftentimes we'll think through with the models, they can now actually pull information directly from the internet. And so one of the items that you can always do is, especially if it's a public financials, is you can ask it, yeah, exactly. Sora is awesome too. Is you can say like, for example, I want this to review NVIDIA. And since NVIDIA is a public company, it'll be able to pull this. And so I can ask it, and if ChatGPT is working today, it should pull this. And so what's really nice is it'll be able to pull this information for me. And this is, by the way, this is the paid version of ChatGPT. So it'll actually cite the sources too. And so it'll tell me, okay, here's what it's going to tell me for the last quarter. It'll pull this information. But if I want it to do these personas, the way I have this do the personas is the best practice is really to help prep the model. So I really want to tell it, first of all, what it's going to be doing and give it time to think about it. And so the way you do that is you tell it that, hey, I'm going to ask you, and you can ask it please and all that, and you can talk to it. And so we've been having a lot of conversations about NVIDIA, so it probably thinks I'm very much interested in NVIDIA at this point. But I'm telling it that I want to review the business model through multiple financial expert personas. And then by telling it that I'm asking it to take a moment to think through it, that'll help prime the model to know, hey, this is what it's going to think through from a task perspective. Yep, exactly. And the new one does provide the web sources. And so you can see it thought about it, and now it's going to help me think through it, and it's going to give me these financial expert personas. So now it's asking me if it wants me to choose the personas for him, or actually ChatGPT will do the personas as well. And when I was actually using this on Claude, by the way, Claude actually went through and created the personas itself, and then I had to tell it, oh, by the way, I want you to create them too. So one of the things that comes out of this too is as a best practice, when you're building your whatever your workflows are for finance, I would say I'd recommend, or what we're finding is in best practice is really to build your workflows so that they're almost LLM agnostic, because each LLM, as they have their updates, or any tool, any AI tool, is certain ones get better on certain things sooner rather than later. So like, for example, right now, Gemini just had a great update on, it's called, I think it's Gemini Research, and it can really help with doing research reports. So that just came out last month, and that wasn't available 6 months ago. And so you never know, there's different things that are coming down the pipeline. So with this, I asked it to create a roundtable discussion, and we're going to create these different personas. And then so what'll happen is they'll create basically a conversation between them, and they'll discuss NVIDIA's business model. And so after that, it'll ask you, usually what happens is ChatGPT will keep asking, like, do you want to do extra items? And the question is, will free and paid GPT generate the same results? It depends on the task, is what I'd say. So the paid one, I know, generates the sources of the results. Generally, for the most part, they do. What I'd say, for example, is ChatGPT just released a $200 per month model. That one's designed to do faster processing. So what I would recommend you do, Hogan, is always understand on the website of, for example, OpenAI, or if you go to like Anthropic or Gemini or Microsoft, they'll tell you here's the difference between your free model, I'd say like your midstream model at this point, and your premium model. And that's the way to understand what is different. Or even too, you can use the same prompt on the different models too as well. So a lot of this is they'll give guidelines, but testing it using the same prompting can kind of tell you what the differences are going to be from that perspective. And then what you can do next is then you can have them continue the discussion. And it will go through and it'll keep coming up with that. And then how you validate. So it's a good question. So Alina, so how you validate, how you apply the discussion to real life is you use it to understand like the areas to watch out for. Like basically you would use this and if you're doing research on whether to invest in the stock or not. And then how you validate the discussion. Actually, it was interesting. So I asked ChatGPT that. And part of it is really understanding, number one, the risks around the company. And number two, it's also understanding what is testing the model. So really knowing what is going on with the organization, understanding the different backgrounds of the industry, and so understanding what it is you're looking at. And so this is where the what they call the human in the loop comes in. So it's knowing based on what it's presenting, is it what they call hallucinations? So is it making things up, or is it giving you information that's relevant? So that's always the thing to validate is, okay, is it telling you stuff that is fact versus is it telling you stuff that may or may not be correct from that perspective? Yeah, and that's a good suggestion. It is too. And so it can go through, and what happens is now it gave a synthesis here too of what it saw from the roundtable discussion from that perspective. And then it'll also tell you where they disagree and areas where it would actually improve the analysis too. And what you can use this for is you can use it to help enhance your financial analysis of NVIDIA. You could go back to it and say, okay, I want to relook at NVIDIA's financials. I want to use it to project earnings, but you can use it for a lot of different applications from that perspective. So do we have any additional questions on prompting or personas? Great. So Tarek, do you have a question, or is that just a comment, or you want to see additional personas? Oh, a little more info. Okay. So the other thing that you can use personas for is perfect. So we also have for more prompting tools. The persona is the other piece where they come up in, is they come up in using them for marketing. And like, for example, if you're going to do with marketing, you can use them for marketing interviews. And where they've come in to play with that, see if I have it in here. Is, for example, oftentimes like with a marketing rollout for a snack, for like a new snack food. So here's an example of this. Is you may want to say, okay, I need to go interview customers to understand how they will receive a new snack food rollout. And so what ChatGPT can do, what Claude can do is they can actually create simulated customers, and then they can respond how those customers would respond and actually give you input into how you think those particular products would be adopted. So here's an example of a rollout of a snack food where I was actually testing it and saying, okay, based on this particular question and answer, how would a Gen Z consumer named Taylor, how would a Gen X consumer named Alex, and how would a baby boomer named Pat tell me about like what their snack food preferences are, and how, and basically we role played and have them respond as their personas. So there's different applications for that from that perspective. And then Donald, with your question in regards to prompting tools, so the way you can find prompting tools, interestingly enough, ChatGPT at this point actually has a prompting tool, as do some of the LLMs. So what was really interesting that I found is you can do trainings on this, or even, for example, you can do a prompt. There's this GPT called Prompt Engineer, where you can say, you can do like an improve my prompt. So you can do improve my prompt. And it can be like, please create a financial analysis related to Samsung's last 3 years of financial results. and then this will give this to you, and then you can plug this into ChatGPT. And what's nice about this particular GPT is that it'll tell you the why behind what it did too. So there's things like that. And then, so as well as one of the questions around biggest users of AI in finance, you know, there's different users. I know, for example, JP Morgan has come out as a very public user of AI in finance. So they're training most of their analysts on this. And then depending on the organization, there are certain organizations investing in the use in particular of AI agents. So for example, a lot of venture capital groups are figuring out how to use AI in intersection with other technologies. And Salesforce has launched what they call Agentforce. So they're trying to launch agents which will be used within the Salesforce environment, but also will be open sourced. And more recently, this is broader than just finance, but NVIDIA 2 days ago at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, noted that they're going to roll out what they're calling digits. So it's a personal computer, and that personal computer will be able to run LLMs equivalent to ChatGPT, Gemini, and all that as well. And the whole point of that computer is intended for people to be able to build agents at home and use from a finance perspective too. So I'd say it's the short answer is it's an evolving usage from that perspective for finance.
Hi.
Hi.
Have you called your name? Oh, anyway, not to worry. How are you? Oh, okay.
Can you turn your mic off, please?
Not over time late today, but just started doing things, and making calls and so on. I'm just still doing that.
Yeah, I think we need
Hold
to
on,
move.
let me see if I can get.
Yeah.
Just to make sure, how she.
Great, perfect. And yeah, and then
Sorry
so then
about
one of
that.
the other questions, perfect, okay. And then so one of the questions is AI can only provide information based on articles written by humans on a subject. Can AI do the same if there's smaller number of articles on a subject? Gary, can you expand on your question a little bit? So are you asking about like AI generated articles, or are you asking about like multiple articles on a or small articles on one topic? Yeah, so if it's a smaller number, it just depends on what's in the model. So one of the things that I would say is if you're using a closed model and you can upload and add data, that helps train the model. So it just depends on what you're using it for. So like, for example, the tool that I'm using right now to actually develop the slide deck, Beautiful AI, you can actually upload articles to it and it'll cite the article, but it'll also develop the slide on the article. So for example, the one on Klarna, when I built the slide, it was built through AI, but in order to train the model to build the slide, I was able to upload a link to the article. So it just, so I'd say it depends on what tool you're using, is from that perspective. So it won't, so there's no one LLM that's like absorbed the entire internet. Like they're predicting that the LLMs could absorb the entirety of the internet by like 2026 or 2027, depending on what article you read. They say it's going to happen really fast. But the way they work is as you ask it questions, it iterates and it learns from that perspective. And then Dale, your question on, do you get the same result if you ask multiple times? Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And that's where the finance perspective comes in. And so what's been really interesting, so there was actually 2 studies done recently. One was by the University of Chicago. They did this specifically on the use of LLMs in finance. And this is where the human expertise matters. And so when you get a result from an LLM, the thing to always remember is it's an algorithm, but it's trained based on words. So it's not necessarily trained, like, yes, it's working towards math, but it's not trained to do heavy compute power. And what I mean by that is we're not at a stage where, yes, it can do financial analysis, but sometimes you may ask it and it'll do 2 + 2. It should answer 4, of course. And of course, these opinions are always my own, and these are based on my testing in my work environment in the business world. But some days, if the model's overloaded, you may hit 2 + 2 and it will give you 5. So that's where, even though we're getting closer to that concept of AI CFO, you still need the CFO and you still need the human in the loop from that perspective too. Okay, and so then the other thing too, as a takeaway, just what I would say as well is this world of AI that we're in, and just the world of technology in general, is always changing. And so one of the things that I'll share with you guys, and what will be in the slide too, is just some tools that you can use. But what I encourage individuals that are exploring this is to really think through what makes sense for you to use, and also continue to test these things. Because, like, for example, we're having this presentation today. We had a similar presentation, I'd say about 3 months ago. What was 3 months ago is different than what is today, even the same models. And then probably in about 3 months, what is out there will probably be different too. So from that perspective, the pace of change is very fast as well. So wanted to thank you guys for your time. And then if you have any other questions, happy to take them. And if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up as well.
Wow, it's terrific. What else do we have?
Great.
Julianne,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I
Go
just wanted to jump in, and great examples and practical uses of the ChatGPT, and how CFOs can start getting to use some of these applications off the bat. What are some other tools that would be fitting for an individual that you think would be very helpful? Or is it basically the Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT functions that are within reach? Is there anything practical for individuals, less so as larger corporation and financial departments, that they could start leveraging?
Yeah, so as far as individuals go, so I really like, for example, this slide deck was built using beautiful.ai. So that I have found is really good for slides, more so than anything else. And then as far as individuals go, what I'd say is think about each of your use cases. So like, if you need new headshots, for example, that is AI photos are pretty evolved, so that might be something to explore, or images, and if you need something that is, if you wanted to think through analyzing a document, but you learn better by hearing, Notebook LLM is one. That one's by Google. And what that does is if you upload a document, it'll create a podcast of someone talking about it. And so a new use case that's come out around that is individuals are uploading their resumes, for example, to hear how people will think about them and how you're presenting your brand to the world. So there's different cases around that. And actually, I have to give credit to one of the individuals, Holly Uber, for that particular use case, because she was trying to figure out how that looks from that perspective. But so what I say is, as you think about using AI in your personal life and your business life, test these tools out, because you'd be amazed at what they do, because a lot of people are thinking about things that most others had never thought about doing before.
There's a question about how can smaller companies fully utilize AI with limited clean data, where you give general common knowledge, or the examples of insight can be obtained of proprietary data?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and because it's like, so for example, the one I gave with QuickBooks is like the smaller companies, and then enterprise as bigger. With the smaller companies, it's ensuring that you think whatever tool you're implementing, you look through and you have the data security around it. So you either buy the lockdown version of it or just don't, of course, make sure that you're not, that you think through what the risks are before you just start uploading data. And then with regards to cleaning data, it is, it's getting it to a point, so you can use these tools to clean the data for you. So get it into, like, for example, if you have a very messy set of numbers, you can clean it yourself, so get it into more of a structured table, or you can use, like, for example, Copilot to upload the data and say, please clean this and format it into a table structure. And it will do that. It just usually takes a lot of iterations. So it kind of becomes a cost benefit of, is it faster for you to do it, or is it faster for you to walk the machine through how to do that at this point?
I was thinking also of the example, because you shared the example of QuickBooks. Of, to me, there's sort of two kinds of QuickBooks users. There are people who, don't have the ability or knowledge to, use something bigger, and they're a small organization, versus a lot of people who are wanting something simple that they can interact with and easily transfer to other people. And in the first one, a lot of times their data isn't clean, and that's the risk I see with a lot of that, is exactly what you're talking about, is clean data. Is yeah, the information's in there, but it's not what I would call clean, and so you got to be careful with that.
Exactly. Well, and what I find is I didn't run it today because the tools are still evolving, because I can tell they're getting ready to launch new tools. But what'll happen is if you upload financial data and it finds it's not clean, it'll actually ask you, hey, I can't do this. Like, so if you say run a financial analysis, it'll say, I noticed this data is not clean. Do you want me to clean it for you? So it will actually ask you first of all, and it'll try and clean it, but then you have to look at it and see, okay, what did it actually do? And that's where the expertise comes in, and make sure it didn't accidentally, like, put COGS somewhere in OpEx, or make your income your expense, because it knows to a point, but it doesn't have that true independent thought.
Right.